Hi, it's Anna Haferman, and today we're going to do this hat on the LK150. Now, this is a little sheep motif design, which is pretty popular these days, these little sheep. So, this is going to incorporate actually three different types of Fair Isle, but they're pretty easy, and if you have done some of my Fair Isle videos, you'll already know most of it. Before we get to it, I want to thank everyone who has supported my channel through YouTube Super Thanks, Buy Me a Coffee, and my channel members. So I appreciate that. Okay, so this hat, this is an adult size, but I'm going to do a child size today because I can get it more of it in frame to make it a little easier. So for the child size, I'm going to cast on from 45 over here. I'm going to E-wrap, and I'm doing this, my 3-1 E-wrap that I do on a lot of my hats. And the reason I do this so often is that it's easy and fast, and for these videos it just makes it a lot easier to do. You could do a regular ribbing or just a hung hem or whatever, but this goes pretty fast, so I'm going to do that. So basically what we do, I've got my green yarn threaded, and I'm going to leave a long tail so I can sew the hat up at the end, and just E-wrap. Now, when I do this, I go, I just go over here. I've got the yarn threaded in the carriage, and then I go just wrap around each needle. And I've shown this in quite a few videos, so really we're just E-wrapping those 3 needles and then just skipping the one that's out of work. So that's all. It's just E-wrapping, which is just going around the needle counterclockwise. And if you don't know how to E-wrap, I have a video on automatic E-wrap. That's a little easier for newbies, but it's a good thing to learn because once you learn how to do it by hand, it's actually faster to do by hand. So I'm just going around each needle, and that's it. Come on, there we go. And with E-wrap, it's important to not have it too tight or too loose. If it's too loose, it just doesn't make a good edge. And if it's too tight, it's really hard to knit it off. So you have to find that sweet spot. And that's one thing that doing the automatic E-wrap makes a really nice even edge. So it's worth trying. So I'll put a link to that video in case you haven't seen that. So I'm going to go on tension 4, and my carriage is just on normal here. So I'm at tension 4, my carriage, that lever's back, that one's forward, back, forward. So that's just normal. And then I'm going to reset my row counter to 0, and I'm going to knit 24 rows. And when you're knitting off from E-wrap, it can be hard to do because there's no weight on the machine yet, on the knitting yet. So you just want to go a little slow. You could have done E-wrap from over waste yarn, and that way you would have something to hang your weights on right away. However, I find that if I go slow, I'm actually putting pressure on the carriage. I'm pushing down. it's easier to do. So once you get 3 rows, it's pretty easy to get some weight there, at least on the edges. And I'm going to try to get them. So what you can do is push your needles out a tiny bit like that, and that gives you enough yarn that you can kind of hook onto easily. And if you only have the 2 weights that came with your machine, you definitely will need to do yourself a favor and order a few more, because there's many times that you're going to need more than 2. And I'll put a link as to where you could get those. And so once you get the weight on there, it's pretty easy to go. Pretty easy to knit. So we go up to 24. 3, 24. Okay, now, and a lot of you have probably done this hem before, but what you do is we go in here, pick up that first, just pick up 1 stitch on the end there and hang that on the needle. Then you find where your bar is. You can see where that empty needle was. You have this larger bar of stitches. Go in and pick up on this one. I'm going to pick up these 2. On some of my tuck hats, I only pick up 1 just to kind of make it sort of look more like the tuck. But you just go in, grab those 2, and hang it on the on that empty needle. And as you hang it, it pulls that one out, so you get that needle back in work. So that's pretty easy to do. So this is easy, a lot easier than doing a like a 1x1, because you only have to, you're essentially hanging half the amount of stitches, so it goes pretty fast. And as you can see, it makes a nice looking mock rib, and it's double layer, so it's warmer around your ears. So I think it's a nice little hem. And then those. And then instead of just letting that flop down, I'm going to pick up that last stitch, and that way when I seam it together, it'll be more, it'll just look a little better. Okay, so I'm at tension 4.5, and I'm going to knit 2 rows in green, which is still my, I'm calling that the ground color. So here's where we are. We've hung the hem. That's what it looks like on the finished hat, because remember, we're doing the inside of the hat is what's showing. So now we're going to do this first row of flecks. Now I have a whole video on these flecks. It's a Fair Isle technique that works pretty well if you don't have a whole lot of stitches to knit in. It works a little better than the faster Fair Isle method, which I showed in another video. So there's one that I called Flex or something like that, that shows kind of in detail how I do this. So first of all, anything that I want in the white, I'm going to select to hold. So I started here at 43 on the right, and I'm just using my 3-1 tool. And so then I'm going to put the carriage in hold, so which means I push the levers these levers back to 1, and both of those are facing that way, and both of these are facing the same way. And so then I'll take the white yarn and I'm going to set it on the floor. All right, so the white yarn is coming from the floor the same way as when you do intarsia. And then the carriage is in hold. The carriage is in hold, so I knit my row in green. And what happened is it knit those stitches back there, but held these. And so then I can just come along with my white yarn and just place it in the needle and pull it through. So I'm just putting it in the hook of that needle and pulling it back. So I'm knitting it in by hand. Now you want to make sure that your latches stay open when you do this, because if they're closed, you're going to drop your stitches. So if you need to open them, you can get your credit card tool and just by hand. And that's pretty easy. And then just anchor the last one on that last needle. All I did, I guess it was off camera. So that last one I just put in the hook, but I didn't pull it through. So that was your first row. And then I'm going to actually on this side anchor that one too. So I'm just pulling out the needle and just putting it in the hook and pulling it back. I'm not pulling it through the stitch. I'm just anchoring it on the needle. Okay, so that was our first row of flex. So now I'm going to knit 2 rows in green. And then I'm going to do my next row of flex. So I'm still on hold on the carriage, and now I want to pick the ones that are kind of in between the ones I did the last time. So it's the ones I did the last time, so it's going to be these. I don't want to pick that first one, so start on 41 on the right there. Okay, so then I'm still in hold over here, so I'm just going to knit back, and again it will knit, the carriage is going to knit the ones back here, and then it's going to wait for me to come along with my white yarn, and I'm going to anchor. That just means kind of getting it in the hook, that's it, but not pulling it through the stitch. And now I'm going to pull that through the stitch. So I'm just getting it in the needle, pulling it through. And you see there's a stitch and a basically a float over that needle, so I just pull it through both of them, and it really just only knits through the stitch, so it's not actually tucking. Now if your needle closes, you definitely want to make sure to get it in there, and don't pull too far, and you kind of want to try to get your stitches the same as what the carriage did. So you're just kind of basically just pulling back, and that's it. And then I'm just going to anchor that last one. Okay, I guess you couldn't see that. I just anchored that last one. And then I'm going to knit 2 more rows. So we've got these 2 rows done. I'm going to knit 2 rows, and I'm going to go 1, 2. Okay, so now here we are. We're on the sheep. Now this is where we're going to kind of change things up a little bit. So I made this little graph, and what I'm going to do is, so these, this is an 8-stitch pattern that repeats across. So all I need to do is have one group of 8, and however many it is high, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So it's 10 rows high, and this corresponds to the needles in each repeat. So there's 8 needles, and then there'll be 8 more, 6, 8, then 8, 2, 4, 6, 8. And I'm just pulling these out so you can see 2, 4, 6, 8. I'm just kind of counting them I'm not pulling them out or putting them in any other position. I'm just kind of moving them so I can count them. 2, 4, 6, 8, 2, 4, 6, 8, 2, 4, 2, 4, 6, 8, 2, 4, 6, 8. And notice I have my needle beds set up in groups of 5. So I've got 5 pink, then 5 white. And I do that because it makes it a lot easier to count for me. Because you count by 5, it's easier than the 10 that it's set up with when you get it at the factory. So basically I've got groups of 8, which means each group of 8 is going to be the same across. So like each group of 8 is the same across the needle bed. So what I need to do now, here's my graph. And if you watch my faster fair isle video, you will have seen this. So what I'm going to do is color this in with the colors I want my hat. Now the bottom is below row 8, well, below that dark line, is going to be the green, and then it changes to blue. So I'm just going to take this, and with colors that match my yarn, I'm going to color it in so that I can easily pick out what I need to pick out. So what I'll do is I go here, and if this is foreign to you, go and watch my the Faster Fair Isle video, which goes into detail about how to do this. So that I wouldn't try to do this without being somewhat familiar with that process. But it's pretty easy to learn. It's a pretty good way to do it. So I'm just coloring all those in with the green, and then the ones above, that's right here where it switches to blue, I'll color those in blue. So there's my blue. And you know, your pens don't have to match your yarn perfectly, but you know, as long as you can tell, like this is my green, this is green, this is blue, it makes it a little easier. Okay, so there's my little chart. So I'm done with that. So here's my chart. So what I'm going to do now, this pattern, I'm actually going to pick this out by hand as I go because it's really only 10 rows, so it won't be too hard, and won't be too hard to pick out. You could use the needle beetle, but in this case, you don't really have to. So I'm just going to show it that way. So first what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark my groups of 8, and I'm going to go and mark my first needle in each group of 8. Now this is a washable marker, so I'm just marking that first needle in my group of 8. Okay, just the first one. And that's going to help me when I'm picking out the pattern as I go. So there's my first needle. And I am using a green pen here. That has nothing to do with the color of the yarn. I'm just using it because it's easiest to see, I hope, on video. Okay, so I'm using the green, so that's my number 1 needle. Then I want to go in and mark these 2 needles, the 4 and the 6, which are going to be the legs of the sheep, and they will also serve as kind of a pivot point for me to pick out needles, because you see where they are, then you can see these 3 are right above that, and where the face starts is right in between there. So it makes a good way to pick it out as you go. So I'm going to mark my 4 and 6 needles. So I go 1, 2, 3. There's my 4. I'm going to push all these back now so I can, no, maybe I won't. Okay, so there's my 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6. 2, 3, 4, and 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6. And these are 4 and 6. So see how they're pretty easy to pick out. 4 and 6. 4 and 6. And you only have to do this once. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6. So in each of those groups of 8, I'm going from 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6. So I'm going to push all those. Okay, so the 4 and 6 needles I'm just pulling out to hold, just to make this a little less confusing. So there we go. Okay, so I had already marked my number 1 needles, and then I have my 4 and 6 needle. So I'm going to mark those, which are these right here, with black. And I'm using black because it's really easy to see, but also because that's the color of the legs. So that actually works out pretty good. And it doesn't really matter what color you use to mark these, but these are going to be the ones that you're going to be working off of for those 10 rows. And it's 10 rows of Fair Isle, so you really can pick this out by hand really easily. Okay, so there are my 4 and 6 needles. All right, and here's my chart. Stick it right there. I don't know if that's going to stay. We'll put it right here. So I'm still in hold over here. And now I'm going to take, I actually need the black yarn. I'm going to put the black yarn on the floor, just like I did with the white. And so that's on the floor. I'm actually going to cut the white yarn because I'm going to need it up. I'm going to need to thread it eventually. So, okay, so I have the black yarn on the floor, and I've got it ready. I've just got it kind of sitting on my lap waiting to go. And I have reset my row counter to 0 because now I'm going to follow this chart. So this number here corresponds to what your row counter is what you should select when your row counter says that number. So when you're on the right here, 0, this is my first row. So what I'm going to do, and I already have done this, is picked out my 4 and 6 needles. So the green's in the feeder, so I have picked out the black needles. So, and I'm still in hold. I'm just going to knit across. And then I'm going to take the black, and I'm going to do this just like I did the white, and I'm going to knit those through. So can you see? So I'll take the black and just knit them through just like I did the white on the other previous 2 rows. Now, definitely want to make sure those latches are open, because if you pull it through without any yarn, with the latch closed, you end up dropping a stitch, and it's makes it really unpleasant. So you're just pulling that through, and don't resist the temptation to pull them both through at the same time, because if you do, the stitches will get too tight. You really have to let them go through one at a time, which is the way the carriage does it. So go to the end, and then I'm just going to anchor that end stitch. So it's just kind of anchored on that needle. I'm going to anchor this one. You probably didn't see that either. Okay, so I'm going to anchor that one. So there we go. And then that's row, that was our first row of knitting, but it was actually row 0 according to my row counter, my chart and my row counter and everything. Okay, so now our row counter says 1. So we find the 1 here. And again, since we have the green in the feeder still, I'm going to pick the black needles. And again, those are those same ones. So it's right above the ones we did the last time. So just pull them out, and that's very easy to do by hand because you marked them. You set yourself up to be able to pick this out very easy. So so then we just knit. Remember, we're still in hold over here, so we're just going to knit. And what happened is the carriage knit those, and then it left a float on these, and that means I can just go through and knit each one through one at a time. And you can get them ready, but still only knit them through one at a time. And try to make them as even as you can with the green stitches. I just kind of push to where the needles stop, and it seems to work fine. But if they seem like, don't pull them back too far or too not far enough. You definitely want them to A, knit through, and B, be big enough stitches so they're not going to distort your pattern. Okay, so now this last one I'm just going to anchor there, and I will use that black later. And this is also a good time for me to knit, to put my weights up. And okay, so now I have 2 in my 2 here on my chart, and my row counter says 2. So now we're going to switch methods, and this is the faster ferrule method that I showed in a video. So we're going to start. We've got green in the feeder already, so we're going to thread this white yarn into the feeder. On the left, and then so the white's ready to go, and this time we're going to change how the carriage goes. So this is a little different. We're still going to stay on hold on this side, and then we're going to put this side into slip, so you're on 2 and the circle there, and that way when I knit across, well, first I want to pick out my needles. So I've got green in the feeder, so I'm going to pick the white, which is the opposite color, and that's how we do it. Whatever's in the feeder, you pick the opposite color, so that's the white. So that's 4, 5, and 6, and you can see it's really easy to see which ones they are because it's right on top of where you mark those leg stitches. So 4, 5, 6, 4, 5, 6. 4, 5, 6. So that's really easy to do. And again, if you wanted to use the needle beetle, you could. But since not everyone has one, we'll just do it like this. And I mean, it's definitely worth getting because there are other patterns that it's a lot harder to pick them out by hand. So I'm going to knit across, and now it's still going to knit those back here and float these because we're still in hold on that side. But now when we get over here, rather than me having to pull the stitch in the yarn in by hand, I'm going to change color in my feeder. And so I have the white here. I put the white yarn in the feeder, and I'm sorry you can't see that, but so now I've got that white yarn in the feeder. And now when I knit across, because I'm in slip, the carriage is going to knit these in and it will slip those. So basically it's going to do the same thing that I was doing before. And we're just going to go real slow. It ends up being a little choppy because you're just knitting 3 and then skipping some. So give it enough time to go past. So there we go. So now the carriage did that for me. Okay, so now we're on 4. So on 4, this time we have white in the feeder, which means we have to pick the opposite colors. So that's 1, 1, 2, and 8 on that 4th row. So 1, remember we marked our first 1, right? 1, 2, and 8 is that one. And the groups of 8, I think I forgot to mention it, you have a seaming stitch on each end. So that's why I didn't include those in when I was separating it into groups of 8. And that's so when you knit it together, you have a stitch. So here's my seam. So there's a stitch that gets used by the seam, and then when you seam it together, it's even and it looks continuous. This one didn't quite work that great there, but it's pretty good. So you want your seam to look nice, and you wouldn't want to end up with half a sheep in there. You want sort of a full sheep. You definitely want a full sheep. So then we go 1, 2, and 8. 1, 2, and 8. 1, 2, and 8. And you can pretty quickly see that you end up with 5, 3, 5, 3, 5, 3. And the end, because that's your seaming stitch and that's the end of the pattern, is going to look a little different. So, so you should just have, you can really kind of, once you establish your pattern, it's pretty easy to see how to do it. So 1, 2, and 8. 1, 2, and 8. 1, 2, and 8. Okay, so then, you know, once you've picked it out, just look. If it looks weird, like you have kind of, never mind the ends, because the ends are always going to look slightly different, but you should have 5, 3, 5, 3, 5, 3. If you had something weird like 6, 2 or something, then you would want to go back and figure out what you're doing there. So it's all just a pattern. You want to do it how you want to make sure your pattern is even, so it repeats. Okay, so we're on 4. We selected our needles. We're going to go across with the white. Now the white's going to knit back here, these stitches, and then it's going to float those. And it's normal for it to go a little choppy like that, just because it's knitting 5 and then skipping, it just chops like that. So don't worry about that. So when you get to the left, what you do is you take your whatever yarn is in your feeder and you change it with the other yarn. And I should have had my green yarn on the other side, but when I parked it, but put your green yarn in there. Usually you park the yarn in this feeder on this side and the yarn in this feeder on this side, but I didn't, and it's not really a huge deal, but it makes it a little easier because it doesn't cross as much. So then you knit with the green, and now because we're in slip over here, it's going to knit everything here and float everything here, which is the opposite of what it did before. So that works out pretty convenient. Okay, so our row counter says 6. Here we are on 6. We have green in the feeder. So we need to pick the white, which is everything else, right? So that's basically everything but that number 1, which we marked on the bed. So just pick every needle but number 1 except the first one. So just everything except that first needle, and that's pretty easy to do. And again, if you were going to do this sheep pattern repeated over and over, you might want to do it so you weren't pulling everything by hand. But with this, since there's so few rows, it's pretty fast. And then I always pull the last one. Okay, so now what's going to happen here? We're on 6. The green is going to knit on these back here. So because it's just that one needle back there, and it's going to, you just want to go a little slow so it has enough slack and enough time to knit off that needle back there. So I go a little slow on that row, okay? And then I double check to make sure it knitted those through. And it did. So then when I'm over there, I just take the green out of the feeder, and I actually should park it over here, not over there. So, and should not get it stuck like that. So it should be under those needles. And you think it's going to catch, but it won't. So that's just the way you do it. So then you put the white in the feeder over on the left, and then knit back. And again, I'm going a little slow. Okay, so now we're on 8. So here's row 8. And this row is different because we have green, white, and black in the same row. So that's this first row where we have the sheep's face. So we're going to follow our rule for faster ferrule, which is whatever color's in the feeder, which is white, we're going to pick the opposite colors. We're going to pick the green and the black. Okay, so anything that isn't white. In this case, we have 2. So the green is that number 1 stitch, and the black is really easy to find because it's between the 4 and the 6. It's the number 5. So you see where it is. It's that one right there. Okay, so then the 1 and the 5, the 1 and the 5. So see, that's really easy to pick out. And when you start, when your pattern gets established, you can really quickly see, oh, it's 1, 3, 1, 3. So then you can just finish off your row like this. So any little trick or tool you have to make things go better really will help you. Okay, so what we did was we had the white in the feeder, we picked out the colors that weren't white. So we're still going to knit, and it's going to knit these back here and float those. So we'll go knit. Okay, and that's what it did. And then we're going to take, first we're going to change color to get that yarn out of the way. So we're going to take the white out of the feeder and put the green yarn in the feeder. But before we knit back, I'm just going to get that so it's not all slacky. Sometimes when you park it, you end up with a lot of slack when you change it to that side. So just kind of try to, if it's too slack, pull it from your feeder and it should be fine. Okay, so now we are ready to go with the green yarn in the feeder. But before we knit back, if we knit back with the green, which is in the feeder, if we knit that back right now, it would knit all of these, but we don't want that. We want these to be black. So we have that black yarn still coming from the floor, and we're going to knit in that black yarn. So I'm going to park, kind of anchor it here on the end. And I'm doing that so I don't have floats going sideways and not, I want the float to go all the way to the end. So then I'm just going to put the black and knit the black bag. I'll go under that one, which happens to be green here, so that makes it easy. And then I will pull that, so it's really just that number 5 needle. I'm just doing the black. I'm going to wait on the green. The green's going to happen later. So I'm going under these needles too. So I'm just going under and pulling through, under, pulling through. When I get to the end, I'm just going to park it. Did you see that? Okay. Now, when I knit back with green, it's going to knit the green ones and float everything else. So, and again, this is another row you want to go a little bit slow on and deliberately. So I'm actually pushing down on my carriage to make sure it's picking everything up. Okay, so that was 3-color Fair Isle on the LK150. See, that wasn't so hard, was it? All right, so now what we'll do, okay, now we're on 10. And so you see at 10, and this is row 10 on the hat, right there, we switch to blue. So all you need to do there is take the green yarn out, just cut it and take it out. And now blue will become our background color. And so it's just going to take the place of the green. So I'm going to thread that blue in the machine. Okay. Okay, so the green was in the feeder, so I'm just going to put the blue in the feeder. Basically, the blue becomes the green, so just think of it that way. It's all you're doing is changing the background. And so I've got the blue in the feeder. And clip it down. Okay, so now, since blue is in the feeder, I'm going to pick everything that isn't blue, which in this case now is white and black. So everything I pick, I select. It's basically everything but that blue one. So that's easy because you just select anything but the one I marked in green. Also not the first one. So everything but that number 1 needle. And I always select the last one. So now we're ready to go. We'll knit across in blue. The blue's in the feeder now. So I'm going to knit across with blue. And make sure that my carriage picked up everything I want to be in blue. And I think it did. Okay. Now what I want to do is, before I switch to white, well, I'm just going to change color here first. Actually, I'm going to change color after, because first I'm going to knit the black, because if I don't, I'll end up crossing the yarn. It's just going to be a little easier to do it this way. So I'll knit in the black, which is that number 5 needle again, and you can see which one it is because you can see the black that you had before, so it's right above it. So you just get in there and do those 2. So I'm going under all the needles except that one, and then knitting in the one I want to be in black. You definitely want to do these one at a time. And definitely make sure that your latches are open, because if you drop a stitch now, you're going to be really unhappy. Okay, so, and I'll pull that black one. And that one. Okay, so that's, and I'm just going to anchor the one on the end. And that just holds it in. Okay, so now I'm going to change color from the blue and go to the white and knit back. So what's going to happen now is these are all going to knit, and these have already been knit for that row, so those aren't going to knit again. So we're going to go across with white. Yeah, I got a little loop on the end there, but I'm not going to worry about that. Okay, so I did get a little loop. I'm going to just tuck that into the seam later on, so I'm not going to worry about it right now. Sometimes I will fix those, but I don't feel like it right now. So okay, here we're on 12, and this is going to be our last row of 3-color Fair Isle. So I have white in the feeder, so I'm going to pick anything that isn't white, which is blue, and then these 3. So the blue is that number 1 stitch, and then the white the black is the ones right above there. So 4, 5, 6. So that's really easy to pick out. 4, 5, 6, 4, 5, 6, 6, 6. Okay. And I forgot to pick the ones. That was what I did wrong. So I'm picking out the ones. All right. So now I've got the ones, which are the green, and the 4, 5, and 6. And then so it should look like that. And you can compare it. So you go like, well, I have 1, then I have 2, then 3, then 2. So just kind of compare and just kind of make sure you've got it how you want it before you do it. So what's going to knit in white are the ones back here, And I can see there's 2 there and then 2 there. So that does make sense. Okay, now this time, if I want to change color first before I knit back, because if I don't, I end up catching that blue yarn in there. So I'm going to change to blue over here. So I'm parking the white one over on the left, changing to blue. And now I'm going to knit through on my, with my black. So I'm going to go like this. And then I'm going to go under that needle there and do 2, 3, go under that needle. Now when you're here, it's kind of easier to get them all ready and then knit them through. But be careful not to close those latches before you need to. And I mean, when you pull them back, they will take care of that themselves. Okay, so go 1, 2, 3. And I'm trying to keep them even. So get them 1. Sorry, I keep jostling my camera. It's because it's right in front of me, which makes it so you can see, but I can still work. I'm like right behind the camera today. I tried doing this standing up and it just didn't really work. So I'm sitting behind the camera today. But it sometimes gets in my way. So I apologize, but I'm doing the best I can. Okay, so that's it for the black. So I'm just going to park it, and I could actually cut it if I wanted to, but I can leave it for now. So we did the black, and now when we come back, the blue, we're on, that was the row we selected, so the blue is going to knit. So we're just going to go a little slow and see how I've got a lot of slack here. I just want to kind of pull it so I get enough tension. Okay, so that now when we are on row 14, we pick, we have blue in the feeder, so we pick white, which is these 5 right above the sheep's horns or whatever it is. And so you can see, so that's those 3 in the middle and then 1 on each side. So there's 5. So you can see it's those 3 plus 1 on each side. So any kind of little hint you can give yourself when picking these patterns out really will help you. So it's not so hard to pick them out by hand. It depends on the pattern though. So some are a little more, some are easier than others. Okay, so that's the ones I want in white. And our 3-color ferrule is done, but we did it and it wasn't that bad, was it? So we're going to knit across with blue, which means it's going to knit all those and float all these. Okay, when we get to that side, we change color. And again, if you haven't done looked at the faster ferrule video and tried that out, you may want to do that first before you jump right into a project. And then I'm going to knit back with the white, which is going to knit all these, float all those. So now we're on 16, and that's our last row of sheep. We have white in the feeder, so we pick the blue. So the white ones are the 3 in the middle, but we pick everything but those. So So we can see it's everything but that 4, 5, and 6. Let's should not have picked those. So to make that, you could put them just right back to upper working position, but to make it clearer, I'm just going to put them back on the latch there so that you can see what I'm doing better, so not to make it unclear what I'm doing. So it's really just everything except that 4, 5, and 6, the 4, 5, and 6 needles. Okay. And then I look at it and go, okay, yeah, 3, 5, 3, 5. Remember, that one always stays in work. And I showed why I do that in a different video. I'll link to all these videos I'm talking about because I'm basically taking a few techniques I showed for Fair Isle in previous videos and kind of combining them and sort of adding this 3-color one. So then we knit with the white. Park the white over here and change to blue. And knit back. And that's the end of my sheep. But I still want to, if I stopped right there and started doing these, it wouldn't define the sheep. So I'm going to do 2 rows of blue, just plain, and I'm going to go set my carriage back to, actually I'll stay in hold there. I'll just stay where I am for now. I'll just knit 2 rows. I'm actually parking that white because it's going to, oh, and now, because I'm still in slip over here, I have to go back to normal because everything's here now, so it's just going to slip them if I leave it like that. So there's my 2nd row. Okay, so those are my sheep. And we can't really see them yet because they're on the other side, but hopefully they're going to look like this. So then what I'm going to do is some rows of flex again. So for that, I'm going to set the carriage to hold on both sides. I'm going to go, this was on normal now. That one's still on hold. So you should be on hold on both sides. So we're switching back to this technique. So we'll just take the white out of the feeder and put it back on the floor. So here's my white yarn. I'm putting it on the floor again. So now we're going to go back to the flex method. And for this hat, I did everything pretty regularly. You could do these randomly if you wanted it to be kind of more of a snowstorm looking thing. If you're, but I'm going to do mine just kind of regularly. So I'm going to start on, let's see, and start on 40, 45, and just select those like I did before. And now if you wanted to select them randomly, you could just pick whichever needles you want and do it the same way. But I'm going to just do it regularly so it makes it. So then I'll knit. And again, it held those needles so that I can knit it back. So I'm just going to put that white yarn in the hook and knit them back. That's it. And yes, it takes a little longer than switching color and knitting back, but because you have one row of flex and then a few rows in between, you can't really do the other method. So for this, I'm doing 1, 2, 3, 4 rows in between. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. Now this is going to be a child size hat. If you want to increase the size of it, you would have to go up by 8 needles. So you'd have to increase, like you go 49 to 49. If you wanted to decrease, you would go 41 to 41, which would make a pretty small hat. So like that's an adult size. So kid size going to be about like that and shorter. And then if you decreased by 2, so that would be 16 stitches, it's going to be even smaller. So you have to go by a multiple of 8, otherwise you're going to end up with a cut in half sheep on the in the middle there, and unless that's something you want, I would not do that. Okay, so here I'm starting on I think it's 41. Okay, and then I'm going to knit. When I do this here, I'm going to, well, that one it doesn't really matter because it's right there. It's on the edge, so 3. Okay, so you just knit that row in. So, and then I'm going to knit 4 rows. Then I'm going to select the same needles I did the first time, which was 43. I think I started with 43 and then went across. So then we just knit across again. We're still in holds. It's going to hold those. And I'm going to come with my yarn. I'm going to anchor on the end needle and just knit everything through. And we'll do a few more of these till we get to the height we want. That's the end of the hat. I'm just going to knit a few more rows and then transfer and gather the top like I usually do, which is a good way to end a machine knitting hat. You can, so shaping the crown is a lot harder on the machine than it is by hand, so though you can do it. Okay, there it is. So I'm gonna do, let's see, I'm gonna do 2 more rows. And I'm actually kind of measuring with my hand. I know my hand is 7.5, so that's what I'm kind of basing this on. So then I did the 2 rows. I'm going to transfer every stitch over one, every other stitch over to its neighbor. I remember trying to learn how to do this, and I didn't have anyone to show me, so I was really trying to get the stitch off without pulling it behind the latch, and it just does not work. So you really have to get that stitch behind the latch and then get it off. So you pull it out, push it in, move over. All right, so now that I've got everything I basically have 2 stitches on every other needle. I want to make sure that the ones that don't have stitches on them are in non-working position. And I can pull all of these out to hold if I want, because that'll make them knit off a little better. But I do want to make sure to get my carriage back to normal if I pull them to hold. So then I'll just knit 2 rows. One, 2. Then I'm going to cut my yarn, and I want enough so I can thread it across, because I'm just going to sew off these stitches now. I just thread that. I cut that yarn, and then all I need to do is go through each stitch like this. And normally I use a double-eye transfer tool for this, but of course I've misplaced all of mine, and I have plenty. I just don't know where any of them are right now. So I just go through. I'm just going through the front of each one. Anyway, if you like my videos, please like and subscribe, and if you have any questions, ask those in the comments. If you decide to make this hat, let me know how it goes for you. Then that's it. Take everything off. Oh, that should be it. I always like to remove all my clips before I take it off the machine. Okay, so let's see how it came out. And there's my sheep. So there you go. And then I'm going to mattress stitch up the side, and then gather the top, and see how it goes from there. So I have started mattress stitching this, and forgot to turn on the camera. So I'm in the middle. I started here, and with the right sides together went up there. So that's the brim, and it's going to go together like that. So I'm kind of in the middle of the brim. And then I'm going 1 stitch in. So you see that's a stitch. See how there's a row of stitches? I'm going 1 stitch in, picking up 2 of the bars. Then I'll go to the other side, and where the yarn I was using came out, you can see it, because if you pull on it, you'll see where it came from. And then you go 1, 2, just like that. And I'm trying to do this so you can see it. It's really hard. For some reason, this is just really hard to do on camera. So I can see that my yarn came out there. So I go right back in that same hole, 1, 2 bars. And once you learn this, it is very, very easy. And it's well worth learning, because almost any project you do is going to have to be finished in some way or another. There's only so many things you can do without doing some mattress stitch or some grafting, which is Kitchener stitch, or something. You're gonna have to do something. So, and I know a lot of people hate sewing things up, but if you learn how to do it, then it's really going to improve your knitting. And I do understand that some people's eyesight is not as good as it once was, so that does make it a lot more difficult. I find that if I wear reading glasses, which I'm actually not doing. I'm not wearing them now. I can actually see pretty well to do this, but if I'm doing something smaller, I wear reading glasses, and that will really help because they just really magnify everything. And so, you can, go over to Dollar Tree or wherever and get a cheap pair of reading glasses, and you're gonna really be happy. So all right, so we're getting to the top here, and you just continue to sew, and that's the end, I think. We'll maybe go back once. Okay, so then put that top thread inside, and then just start pulling on this. Now you still have all these tails in there. We're going to have to weave those in, but I'm just pulling this to get it together, and you kind of have to tuck that in a little. Okay, so your goal here is to close up the top so that you have a little hat.